After decades of being their personal bank and watching them spoil my sister, my parents finally came to me for help. Their golden child had failed, and I had only 3 words for them. They stood on my doorstep, looking haggard and defeated, a sight I'd never witnessed in my entire life. The unwavering confidence, the casual authority they always held over me, had just evaporated, replaced by a raw, desperate panic. For a split second, I almost felt a flicker of the old obligation, that conditioned response to jump in and fix things. But then I saw the shadow of my sister's failure looming behind them, the ghost of 1,000 unfair choices, and the flicker died. They asked me what they were supposed to do, how they were supposed to survive the mess they'd created. And I gave them my answer. But before I tell you what those 3 words were, you need to understand how we got here. You need to understand the decades of choices, the lifetime of being the forgotten son that led to that final, deafening silence on my front porch. My story starts in a house where love felt less like a feeling and more like a resource, one that was allocated with the precision of a budget. My sister Sarah got the lion's share. She was born 2 years before me, and from her first breath, she was the sun our family revolved around. I was just a distant planet, lucky to catch any leftover warmth in her shadow. Sarah was the golden child, though we didn't have that term back then. She was just Sarah, perfect, brilliant, and deserving of everything. And I was just me, responsible, quiet, and consistently overlooked. The favoritism wasn't subtle, it was baked into the architecture of our childhood. I remember when I was 8, I wanted a new bike more than anything. I did chores for months, saving every penny. On my birthday, my parents presented me with a rusty, second-hand bike from a garage sale. It was too big, the chain kept slipping, and the handlebars were crooked. "It builds character," my dad said with a dismissive wave. 2 months later, for no reason at all, they bought Sarah a brand new, gleaming pink Schwinn with tassels. When I pointed out the difference, my mother just sighed, annoyed. "Sarah is more delicate. She needs something reliable. You're tough. You can handle it." This was the story for everything. Sarah's scraped knee was a code red emergency, requiring antiseptic, cartoon bandages, and ice cream for bravery. When I was 10, I fell out of a tree and broke my arm. The bone was visibly angled, a sickening curve under the skin. My father looked at it, his face tight with irritation, and said, "Well, I guess we have to go to the emergency room. This is going to take all afternoon." My pain was an inconvenience. Hers was a tragedy. I've since read that parents often unconsciously favor the child who's most like them. And Sarah was a perfect reflection of my mother. Social, charming, and a little dramatic. I was quiet and methodical like my father, but he seemed to resent those same traits in me, like he hated seeing his own flaws mirrored back at him. They talked about how important it was for her to have a safe and reliable car. 2 years later, on my 16th birthday, I was handed a bus schedule. "It's time you learned some real-world skills," my dad announced. I didn't argue. I just got a job bussing tables and started saving. It took me a year to buy a 15-year-old Toyota that smelled like stale cigarettes and had a driver's door that was more of a suggestion. I was proud of that car. I earned it. But a part of me always felt that sting when I saw her convertible, a monument to their unequal affection. When it was time for college, they dropped the pretense of fairness completely. Sarah wanted to go to a private, out-of-state liberal arts college with a yearly tuition that cost more than my car. My parents didn't blink. They took out loans, dug into savings, and proudly told everyone their daughter was heading off to an elite school. They paid for her dorm, her meal plan, her sorority dues, and her spring break trips to Cancun. A year later, I sat my parents down to talk about my own college plans. My dad cleared his throat and gave me a speech I'll never forget. "Look," he started, "we've invested a lot in Sarah's education. We just can't afford to do it all over again. Besides, you're the self-reliant one. You'll figure it out. A state school is perfectly fine, and you can get a loan." The message couldn't have been clearer. Sarah was an investment. I was an expense. And so I figured it out. I spent 2 years at a local community college, living at home, which was its own special kind of hell. I worked 2 jobs, one flipping burgers, one stocking shelves overnight. I slept in 4-hour chunks, my life a blur of textbooks, grease-splattered uniforms, and pure exhaustion. The loneliness was crushing. It's no surprise that studies show non-favored kids are more than twice as likely to feel lonely, and I felt it in my bones. I watched friends go off to real universities, have the college experience, while I was stuck on a treadmill, fueled by a bitter resentment I couldn't even afford to acknowledge. After 2 years, I'd saved enough to transfer to a decent state university, but I still had to take out massive student loans. I graduated with a degree in computer science, a mountain of debt, and a hardened view of the world. I learned early that I could only depend on myself. This kind of hyper-independence, I found out later, is a classic defense mechanism for kids like me. It wasn't a choice, it was survival. My career took off fast. I was focused, driven, and used to working harder than everyone else. I landed a great software development job, and for the first time in my life, I was financially stable. I paid off my student loans in 5 years and built a nice savings account. I was proud of what I had built, all by myself. Meanwhile, Sarah graduated with a degree in Renaissance poetry and moved to a big city to find herself. This journey, of course, was sponsored by my parents. They co-signed a lease on a trendy loft apartment I knew they couldn't afford and gave her a startup fund to become a lifestyle blogger. And that's when my role in the family shifted. It wasn't enough for me to just be the responsible one. Now I was supposed to be the family's financial bedrock. It started small. A call from my mom. "Honey, the property taxes are a little high this year. Could you help us out, just this once?" I did. A few months later, "Your father's transmission went out. We're in a real bind." I paid for it. Then it was medical bills, a new roof, a vacation they desperately needed. Each time it was an emergency. But it was never just once. It became a pattern. Their money was for funding Sarah's dreams. My money was for funding their reality. I was their safety net, their retirement plan. They'd tell their friends, "Our son is doing so well. He takes such good care of us." They wore my financial support like a badge of honor, proof of their great parenting. They never saw the irony. They never really saw me at all. For the next 10 years, this toxic dynamic became set in stone. I lived hundreds of miles away, but the financial umbilical cord was still firmly attached. I'd get a call, a text, a new urgent request for money, and I'd just send it. I told myself it was easier than fighting, easier than the guilt trips. My money kept them comfortable, while they kept funneling their own resources to Sarah. And Sarah's lifestyle was something else. She'd rebranded as a curator of bespoke experiences, a job title so meaningless it was almost impressive. Her Instagram was a glossy catalog of a life I was indirectly paying for. One week it was a silent yoga retreat in Bali, the next a gallery opening in Paris. She wore designer clothes, ate at Michelin-star restaurants, and was always smiling for the camera. My parents would forward me her posts, gushing, "Look at our girl, she's taking the world by storm." I'd stare at the photos with a hollow feeling in my chest. She wasn't taking the world by storm, she was buying it. The resentment was a low, constant hum under the surface of my life. The experts will tell you this kind of favoritism breeds hostility between siblings. I didn't need an expert, I could feel it festering inside me. Then something changed. I met Alex. Alex was kind, smart, and fiercely independent, with a wonderful, normal family. Being with Alex was like stepping out of a dark, cramped room into the sun. For the first time, I saw what a healthy family was supposed to look like. We fell in love, and we started talking about a future, our future. We wanted a house, a dog, maybe a family of our own. This was the first goal I ever had that was purely for me. It wasn't about surviving or paying off debt or propping up my parents. It was about building joy. As we started saving for a down payment, the calls from my parents felt different. The requests for a few hundred here, 1,000 there, weren't just annoying anymore. They felt like a threat to my happiness. So I started to pull back, gently at first. "I'm a little tight this month, we're trying to save," I'd say. The response was immediate and cold. "Oh," my mom would reply, her voice thick with disappointment. "It's just that the furnace is making a funny noise. I guess we'll just hope for the best." She was a surgeon with passive aggression. My dad was more direct. "After everything we've done for you, you can't spare a little to help your own parents?" They couldn't see the hypocrisy. My funding their lives had become so normal that my first boundary was seen as a betrayal. The whole thing came to a head on a rainy Tuesday in October. My mom called. Her voice had a forced calm that I knew meant disaster. "We need to have a family meeting," she said. "It's about Sarah. Can you drive down this weekend?" I knew this was it. Sarah's social media had gone quiet. The exotic trips were replaced by vague quotes about adversity. My gut tightened. This wasn't just about Sarah. This was about me. I drove the 6 hours down. Alex wanted to come, but I needed to do this alone. When I walked in, the scene was like a stage play. My parents sat on the couch, faces grim. Sarah was curled in an armchair, wrapped in a blanket. It was an intervention, and I was the one being intervened upon. My father laid it all out. Sarah's business had collapsed. Turns out, curating bespoke experiences was just a fancy term for spending investors' money on herself. She was being sued. She had maxed out a dozen credit cards. She was over $100,000 in debt. My parents, in their frantic effort to keep her fantasy alive, had drained their savings and taken out a second mortgage. They had nothing left. Then my father looked at me. No shame, just expectation. "You need to help," he said. It wasn't a question, it was a command. She needs $100,000 to pay off her debts and start fresh. It's the only way. My mother chimed in, her voice trembling. She's your sister. It's what family does. You have the money. You've always been the responsible one. That word again. Responsible. Not a son, a tool, a resource. Sarah still hadn't looked at me, just sat there, a perfect portrait of victimhood. Something inside me, a spring of resentment coiled tight for 30 years, finally snapped. The room went quiet in my head. I started to laugh. It was not a happy sound. It was dry and brittle and full of pain. They all stared, shocked. "You're kidding me, right?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "This is not a joke," my father boomed. "Your sister's life is falling apart." "Her life is falling apart because of choices she made and choices you made," I shot back, the calm breaking. And then the dam burst. "Let's talk about what family does," I said, my voice rising. "Did family buy me a car? No. Did family pay for my college? No. Did family give me a startup fund? Absolutely not. I was on my feet, pacing the living room my money helped maintain. But family did call when the property taxes were due. Family called when the transmission failed. Family called to pay for vacations and a new roof. For 10 years, I have been this family's ATM, pouring my money into this house, into your lives, so you could pour every last cent you had into her." I pointed at Sarah, who finally looked up, her eyes wide with shock. "You," I said, my voice dripping with bitterness, "you have lived a fantasy life on my dime. Every brunch, every trip was subsidized by me. I worked 2 jobs to get through school while you were at sorority parties. I ate ramen in a tiny apartment to pay off my loans while you were in a loft you couldn't afford. And you have the audacity to sit there and expect me to bail you out again?" The room was electric. My mother stood up, her face a mask of indignation. "How dare you," she hissed. "How dare you keep score? We are your parents. We gave you life. You owe us." "Oh, you?" I yelled. "I've been paying you back my entire life. For what? For being born second? For not being her?" Sarah finally found her voice. "You're just jealous," she spat. "You've always been jealous." And that was it. The moment of absolute clarity. It was never just about the money. They genuinely couldn't see me. They saw a resource they were entitled to and a bitter, jealous brother holding it back. In their story, I was the villain for finally saying no. I wasn't a son to them. I was an emergency plan that had just refused to activate. I looked at their 3 furious, uncomprehending faces and felt a strange calm wash over me. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. "I'm done," I said, my voice flat. "The bank is closed. Permanently." I turned, walked out the front door into the rain, and didn't look back. That was the hardest conversation of my life. Walking away felt like tearing out a part of myself, even a rotten part. But it was also the first day of my real life. The fallout was immediate, just not for me. If you've ever felt like the scapegoat, or if this story is hitting home, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. It lets me know I'm not the only one. Now, let me tell you what happened after I closed the bank of me for good. The first 2 weeks were a storm of digital rage. My phone buzzed nonstop. My parents switched between fury and manipulative pity. "You are tearing this family apart," from my father, followed an hour later by, "Sarah isn't eating. I hope you're happy," from my mother. They tried to use every ounce of guilt I'd ever been conditioned to feel. My sister's messages were pure venom. She called me a jealous, miserable monster. Not once did any of them acknowledge the truth of what I'd said. No apology, no self-awareness. It just proved I'd made the right decision. With Alex's support, I blocked their numbers. All of them. The silence was unnerving at first, but then it became peaceful. Without my money, Sarah's perfect life imploded. She was evicted. Her car was repossessed. The investors sued. Reality, for the first time, came crashing down on her. She had to get a real job as a barista. My parents were distraught. They called relatives, painting me as a cold-hearted villain. Some relatives called, urging me to be the bigger person. I politely told them they only knew one side of the story, and my decision was final. And here's the thing about being the golden child, and the research backs this up. You never learn how to fail. They're praised so much, they never develop resilience. Sarah wasn't built for stress because my parents had shielded her from it her entire life. When the bubble popped, she didn't know how to stand on her own. Meanwhile, my life started to blossom. A few months after I cut them off, Alex and I bought a house. We got a golden retriever puppy. We planted a garden. The money that used to fund my family's dysfunction was now being invested in my own joy. The weight I had carried for decades was gone. A huge part of my healing came from therapy. My therapist gave me the vocabulary for my experience: golden child, scapegoat, parental favoritism. Hearing a professional validate my feelings, explaining that these were real, documented patterns, was incredibly liberating. I learned that setting boundaries wasn't cruel, it was self-preservation. I grieved for the childhood I never had, and slowly I started to heal. 2 peaceful, wonderful years went by. Alex and I got married in our backyard. I didn't tell my parents. I felt a pang of sadness, but I knew inviting them would just be inviting chaos into the happiest day of my life. Then, one Saturday, the past showed up on my doorstep. It was my parents. I barely recognized them. They looked older, smaller, utterly defeated. They told me the bank had foreclosed on their house. The second mortgage they took out for Sarah, plus years of bad decisions, had finally caught up. They were being evicted in 30 days. My mother started to cry. "We're so sorry," she said, though the words sounded rehearsed. "We know we made mistakes, but we're your parents. We have nowhere to go. We need you." They asked if they could move in with us, just for a little while. They asked for money. They were desperate. I looked at them, standing on the welcome mat of the home I had built with peace and boundaries. I saw the ghosts of the little boy with the rusty bike, the exhausted teenager working overnight shifts, the young man who sacrificed his own future for their comfort. I saw the endless cycle of them making a mess and me being expected to clean it up. My mother looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Please," she whispered, "what do you want us to do? We'll lose everything." I took a deep breath. I felt the old programming trying to claw its way out, but it was met with a new, stronger wall of self-worth. The anger was gone. The resentment was gone. All that was left was a quiet, unshakable resolve. I finally gave them my answer, my 3 words: figure it out. And then I gently closed the door. Closing that door was the end of their story in my life, but it was the beginning of mine. I learned you cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. My whole life, I had been the designated warmth for my family, and I had been burning down to embers. My only real responsibility was to myself and the new, healthy family I was building with Alex. Setting that final boundary wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. It was about reclaiming the power that had been denied to me for 30 years. The peace I have now was worth every painful moment it took to get here. I finally understood that I didn't owe them my future, and I didn't have to pay for their past. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with your family? What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. I thought my brother needed my car for a job interview. He said it was a real life-changing opportunity, a final interview for a corporate gig across the state that could finally get him on his feet. I was wrong. He sold it. My car, the one I spent 3 years working double shifts to buy, was gone. Sold for a fraction of what it was worth to pay off a gambling debt I never even knew he had. Now, my parents, the same people who taught me the value of a dollar, are telling me to forgive and forget. They're telling me to just let it go because he's family. But they don't know what I'm about to do. They don't know the choice I've made. And once I make it, our family will never be the same. This isn't just about a stolen car. It's about the moment I realized that sometimes love means you have to stop loving someone blindly. It's about the moment I chose justice over forgiveness, and in doing so, chose myself. Let me tell you about my car. It wasn't anything flashy, not a Ferrari or some sports car screaming for attention. It was a 4-year-old deep blue sedan, and I took amazing care of it. Just over 50,000 miles. To anyone else, it was just a car. To me, it was everything. It represented 3 years, 1,095 days of sacrifice. Every party I missed, every early morning, every late night bussing tables after my day job. I bought it with cash, $8,000 that felt like a million because I'd earned every single cent. If you closed your eyes, the leather still smelled new. It was my quiet space, my escape pod, my proof of independence. I loved that car. And my brother, Liam, knew it. Liam's my only brother, 2 years younger. He's always been the charismatic one, with an easy smile and stories that could charm anyone. I was the responsible one, the planner, the one who always colored inside the lines. Our parents used to call me their rock and Liam their wild card. They'd say it with a laugh, like his recklessness was just some charming quirk. For years, I saw it that way too. He'd get into scrapes, lose a job, need a few $100 to tide him over, and I, just like my parents, would be there to catch him. We were enabling him, I see that now. We were cushioning his falls so he never learned how painful it was to actually hit the ground. So when he came to my kitchen table 2 weeks ago, his eyes wide with excitement, I wanted to believe him. He was fidgeting with a coaster, talking a mile a minute. "It's the one, sis, I'm telling you," he said, his voice buzzing with an energy I hadn't seen in years. "A management trainee program with a big logistics company. 3 rounds of interviews and I'm in the final 3. It's in the city, 3 hours away. I need to get there. My old beater won't make it past the county line." He looked so earnest. He had a printout of the job description, a name, a time, an address. He had an answer for everything. It felt so real. A part of me that had been watching him drift for years was desperate for this to be his big break. I wanted him to succeed. I wanted our family to finally stop worrying about the next late-night phone call. "Of course," I said, the words tumbling out before my brain could object. "You can take my car. Just be careful with it." "I will, I swear," he said, jumping up to hug me. "You won't regret this. I'll have it back by tomorrow night, filled with gas. This is it. This is the start of everything." He left with my keys and a smile. I spent the rest of the day feeling proud. I was being a good sister, helping my brother build a better life. The next day came and went. No call, no text. By 10 p.m., that familiar unease started to crawl up my spine. Liam was flaky, but he usually checked in when he was in trouble or needed something. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. I tried again, voicemail. I sent a text. "Hey, everything okay? Let me know when you're heading back." Nothing. I called my parents. "Have you heard from Liam?" "Oh, honey, don't worry," my mom said in that placating tone she always used for him. "You know how he gets. He's probably out celebrating after the interview. He'll call." But another day passed, and another. The silence was deafening. My pride curdled into this cold, heavy dread in the pit of my stomach. I was making excuses to my boss, taking ride shares to work, the costs piling up as my anxiety shot through the roof. I started calling his friends. None of them had seen him. The job interview story was starting to feel really thin. The breaking point came 4 days after he left. I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace, looking for a cheap bike to get me to work, when I saw it. My car. There was no mistaking the deep blue paint, the tiny scratch on the rear passenger side door from a rogue shopping cart, the alumni sticker on the back window. The pictures were taken in some dingy parking lot I didn't recognize. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. The listing was marked sold. The description was short. Runs great, clean interior, need gone ASA, cash only. The price was $2,000. $2,000! I thought I was going to be sick. He sold my $8,000 car, my 3 years of work, for $2,000. The room was spinning. This couldn't be real. With shaking hands, I called my parents. I could barely get the words out. "Mom, Dad, Liam, he sold my car." There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. It wasn't the silence of shock. It was the sound of people who already knew. "Dad," I whispered, my voice breaking. He let out a deep, weary sigh. "We need you to come over, honey." I took a rideshare to their house in a total haze. When I walked in, they were both at the dining room table, their faces etched with a familiar mix of pity and resignation. Liam was nowhere in sight. "Where is he?" I demanded. "He's staying with a friend," my mom said, not looking at me. "He needed some space." "Space? He stole my car! He sold it!" I was shouting now, fury breaking through the shock. "Did you know? Did you know he was going to do this?" "No, of course not," my dad said, a little too quickly. "He called us the day after he left. He was in some trouble." "What kind of trouble?" My mom started crying softly. "He has a problem, honey. A gambling problem." The words just hung there. A gambling problem. It was like a missing puzzle piece sliding into place, and it made a horrifying kind of sense. The constant need for money, the lost jobs, the secrecy. It wasn't just recklessness. It was an addiction. "He owed some very bad people a lot of money," my dad said, his voice low. "They were making threats. He panicked. He said he was going to sell the car to pay them off and that he'd pay you back. Pay me back? With what? He sold an $8,000 car for $2,000. I threw my phone on the table. He threw it away. He threw my hard work away for nothing. We know you're angry, my mom said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. But he's your brother. He was desperate. He made a terrible mistake. But he's terrified and he's sorry. Sorry? Is he here to say that? No, he's hiding. I looked from my mom's tear-streaked face to my dad's exhausted one. And then it hit me. They weren't just delivering news. They were trying to manage me, to smooth it all over. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Just accept this?" "We want you to be the bigger person," my dad said. "He's hit rock bottom. Kicking him while he's down won't help. The car is gone. We can't change that. But we can help him get better, as a family." I just stared at them. They weren't on my side. They were on his. They were so busy managing his addiction that they were willing to sacrifice me, my property, my trust, my security, on the altar of his problem. They were asking me to absorb the consequences so he wouldn't have to. "I worked for 3 years for that car," I said, each word cold and precise. 3 years. He stole it with a lie you both knew about for days while I was sick with worry. He committed a crime. "It's not a crime when it's family," my mom whispered, as if that was some universal truth. "Yes, it is," I snapped. "Selling something that isn't yours is theft. It's grand theft auto, to be specific." The legal term popped into my head, sharp and clear. "Don't be so dramatic," my dad said, his patience finally snapping. "We're not talking about the police, for God's sake. We're talking about your brother. We'll figure out a way to pay you back, but you need to let this go. Forgive him." I looked at their faces, so earnest, so misguided, so trapped in the cycle of his addiction. They thought they were helping, but they were the architects of his ruin. And they were asking me to join them, to set myself on fire to keep him warm. I stood up. The shock was gone. The fury was gone. All that was left was a terrifying, crystal-clear resolve. "No," I said, "I won't let this go, and I will not forgive him." I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me. I knew I wasn't just the victim of a theft anymore. The betrayal wasn't just Liam's, it was theirs too. For the next 48 hours, I was running on pure, cold anger. I wasn't just sad, I was on a mission. The feeling of betrayal was this constant pressure in my chest. My parents' words, "Let it go, he's your brother," kept ringing in my ears. They saw this as a messy family drama. I saw it for what it was, a felony. My brother didn't just make a mistake. He committed grand theft auto, and by selling the car, probably title fraud too. My first step was to stop thinking like a victim and start thinking like a detective. This wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about getting the facts so straight that no one, not my parents, not Liam, could dismiss it as just a family spat. My investigation started with that Facebook ad. The seller's profile, John Smith, was obviously fake, a dead end. But he'd made a rookie mistake. In the corner of one photo, reflected in a storefront window, I could just make out the partial name of a business. On and Gold. A quick Google search for pawn shops in the city where the interview was supposed to be gave me a list. I started calling. Fourth try, I hit pay dirt. "Hi, I'm trying to track down a blue sedan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It might have been sold in your parking lot a few days ago." The guy on the phone was gruff. "Lady, we see a lot of things in our lot. Can't help you." "The person who sold it might have come inside," I pressed. "He's in his late 20s, probably looked a little desperate." There was a pause. "Look, I don't want any trouble." "I'm not trying to cause trouble for you," I said quickly. "I'm trying to recover my stolen car. The man who sold it is my brother. He couldn't have transferred the title legally. He would have had to forge my signature or use a fake bill of sale." I was just throwing out legal terms I'd heard, hoping I sounded like I knew what I was talking about. Another pause, then a sigh. A guy came in right after. Tried to cash a personal check for $2,000 from some guy named Henderson. We don't cash personal checks that big for non-customers. He got real mad. I told him to go to the guy's bank. Henderson. I had a name. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The owner also described the buyer, a middle-aged man in a work van. He remembered Mr. Henderson had come in first, asking if they bought cars. The pawn shop didn't, but he'd hung around. It was a predatory sale. Liam, desperate for cash, ran right into a bottom feeder who knew he was getting the deal of a lifetime. Next, I had to confirm the biggest lie, the job interview. Liam had named the company Viridian Global. I pulled up the official-looking email he'd sent me. With fresh eyes, I saw the cracks. The sender's address was a generic Gmail account, not a corporate one. I called Viridian Global's HR department. "Hello," I said. "I'm calling to verify an interview for a candidate named Liam, our last name." The representative was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, due to privacy policies, I can't discuss candidate information." My mind was racing. "I understand, but this is an emergency. He borrowed my car for an interview at your city branch 4 days ago, and I haven't heard from him since. I'm just trying to confirm he made it there safely." Her tone shifted. She put me on hold. A minute later, she was back. "Ma'am, I've checked our visitor logs and interview schedules for that day. There was no one by that name scheduled. In fact, we don't have a candidate with that name anywhere in our system." The floor just dropped out from under me. It's one thing to suspect it, but to have it confirmed so coldly was another thing entirely. The entire story was a lie, complete with a forged email, all to get my keys. Now I had to deal with my family. I knew it would be like talking to a brick wall, but I needed to do it. I had to give them one last chance before I took the final step. I called another family meeting, this time at my apartment. They walked in looking like they were attending a funeral. "What is this, a deposition?" my dad asked. The joke fell completely flat. "I've done some research," I began, keeping my voice level. "First, the job interview? A complete lie. I called the company. Liam was never a candidate." My mother flinched. My father held up a hand. He was ashamed, honey. He didn't want to admit how bad things were. "So lying was better?" I shot back. "Okay, let's talk about the sale. He sold my $8,000 car for $2,000 to a man named Henderson in a pawn shop parking lot. He sold it without the title, which means he committed a felony. In this state, that's punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine." My voice gained strength with every word. My dad's face went pale. He hadn't thought about actual prison time. "And finally," I said, looking straight at them, "the gambling debt. Do you know how much he owed? Do you know who he owed it to, or did you just take his word for it?" They just looked at each other. They had no idea. "You are enabling him," I said, the words sharp. Every time you make an excuse, every time you bail him out, you tell him his actions have no consequences. You think you're helping, but you're just funding his addiction. The money you give him, the lies you cover up, they're the shovels he's using to dig his own grave. "That is not fair," my mom cried. "He is our son. We love him." "I love him too," I yelled, my voice finally cracking. "I love him so much that I'm willing to do what you're not. Let him hit the ground. Let him face the mess he made. Love isn't protecting someone from reality. Sometimes love is letting reality be the teacher." "What are you saying?" my dad asked, his voice low and threatening. "I'm saying I have an appointment tomorrow morning," I said, taking a deep breath. "I'm going to the police to file a stolen vehicle report. I'm going to give them Liam's name. I'm going to give them Mr. Henderson's name. I'm going to give them the fake email. I am going to tell them everything." My mother let out a sob. "You can't! You'll ruin his life! He'll get a criminal record!" "He already ruined his life," I replied, my voice turning to steel. "A criminal record is just the official paperwork. Maybe, just maybe, it's the one thing that will finally make him realize he needs to change. Because your love and money clearly haven't." My father stood up, his face purple with rage. "If you do this, you are no longer a part of this family. This is your choice, him or us." It was the ultimatum I knew was coming, the last desperate move of enablers losing control. A week ago, it might have shattered me, but standing there, I felt a strange sense of peace. The choice wasn't about them or him. It was about me. Was I going to stand by and watch a loved one self-destruct to keep a fragile peace? Or was I going to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost? I looked my father straight in the eye. "Then I guess I'm turning my back on you," I said softly, "because I'd rather be alone and right than with you and wrong." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. They left without another word. As the door closed, I didn't feel sadness. I felt free. The next morning, I walked into the local police station. It felt surreal. For a second, my parents' threat echoed in my head. "You are no longer a part of this family." But then I thought of my car, the lies, and Liam. This wasn't about betraying my family. It was about trying to save what was left of it, and myself. I sat down with a detective who had tired eyes and had probably heard it all. I laid everything out: the car title, the Facebook ad, my notes, the fake email. I told him the story from the beginning, sticking to the facts. When I finished, he leaned back. "So, to be clear, your brother, Liam, borrowed your car under false pretenses and sold it without your permission. The title was in the car?" I winced. "Yes, I know it was stupid. I keep it all in the glove compartment. I never thought." "You never thought your own brother would steal from you," he finished for me. "Happens more than you'd think. What he did is grand theft auto. Since he probably forged your signature on the title, that's another felony." He told me that family relation is irrelevant to the law in a case like this. "What you're doing," he said, looking at me with something like respect, "is the right thing. And the hard thing. Most families try to handle this internally, and it almost never works. The behavior just gets worse." I signed the official statement, listing my brother as the suspect. It felt like signing a death certificate for our relationship. The detective said they'd put out an alert for the car and a warrant for Liam's arrest. Walking out of that station was like walking into a new life. The weight of protecting my brother, of being the family's shock absorber, was gone. The fallout was immediate and nuclear. The police found my car within 2 days. Mr. Henderson, the buyer, was furious, but surrendered it when faced with a charge for possessing stolen property. I had to pay a few $100s in impound fees to get it back, a small price to pay. Seeing my car again, actually having it back, was emotional reunion. It was mine. I had fought for it and won. The same day, Liam was arrested. My parents called, hysterical. "Are you happy now?" My mother shrieked into the phone. "They put him in handcuffs. Your brother. They treated him like a criminal." "He is a criminal, Mom," I said, my voice weary. "He committed a crime, and this is what happens." "You did this! You tore this family apart!" my father yelled. "And whose fault is that?" I asked quietly. "Mine for reporting a crime, or his for committing it? You could have driven him to rehab. You could have cut him off. You had other options. You just chose to blame me." I ended the call. For weeks, they bombarded me with messages, begging me to drop the charges one minute and cursing me the next. I was cold, heartless, unforgiving. The legal process was slow. Liam was charged with grand theft auto and forgery. Since it was his first offense and the victim was family, his lawyer pushed for a plea deal. The prosecutor's office called me. They asked if I'd support a deal involving probation and mandatory long-term treatment instead of prison. This was the final test. My parents thought I wanted revenge, that I wanted to see him behind bars. But they never got it. I didn't want to punish him. I wanted him to heal. "Yes," I told the prosecutor, but with strict conditions. 1-year inpatient gambling addiction program, mandatory financial counseling, and court-ordered restitution. He has to pay me back the $2,000, plus the impound fees and my rideshare costs. And he has to pay it back himself from a job he gets and keeps. My terms were accepted. Liam took the deal. He got 5 years of probation, with the first year in a residential treatment facility. I didn't see him before he left. But a week after he arrived, I got a letter. His handwriting was shaky. It wasn't full of excuses or pleas for forgiveness. It was just a few simple sentences. "I hated you for what you did," he wrote. "I hated you for calling the police. I thought you had ruined my life. But sitting here, with a clear head for the first time in years, I realize you didn't ruin my life. You saved it. You were the only one who loved me enough to stop me. Thank you." Tears streamed down my face. Not tears of sadness, but of a painful, complicated relief. It's been over a year now. Liam is still in his program. He calls me once a week. The conversations are awkward, but we're talking. We don't talk about the past, we talk about the future. He's working in the facility's kitchen. He's been clean for 14 months. The restitution checks for exactly $100 arrive on the 1st of every month, from his own account. My relationship with my parents is different. It's strained. After months of silence, my mom called and apologized. Not for Liam, but for her own blindness. She and my dad started going to support groups for families of addicts. They're learning a new way to love their son, not by shielding him, but by supporting his recovery. The wounds are deep, and I don't know if they'll ever fully heal. We may never be the family we were, but maybe that's a good thing. The family we were was built on secrets. The one we're trying to become is being built on truth. I made a choice that felt like detonating a bomb in the middle of my family, but I did it because the house was already rotten. My brother's addiction was a sickness, but the enabling, the constant forgive and forget was a poison killing us all. I learned that true forgiveness isn't about wiping the slate clean. It's about demanding accountability, and only then choosing to move forward. I got my car back, but I saved myself. And in the process, I might have just saved my brother too. I set a boundary that became a lifeline he didn't even know he needed. Sometimes the hardest thing you can do is also the most loving. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been a hard journey, but I felt it was important to share. So many of us get caught in these complicated family dynamics, especially with addiction. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful to hear your own experiences in the comments below. It helps to know we're not alone. And if you found this story meaningful, please consider liking and subscribing for more stories about navigating life's toughest challenges. My parents gave my sister $80,000 for her wedding, but when I got engaged, they told me to elope. For my whole life, they treated my sister like a princess and me like an afterthought. When they spent a fortune on her dream wedding and told me that boys don't need one, I'd finally had enough. They expected me to just stand by quietly, to play the role of the supportive, invisible son they'd always wanted. What they didn't expect was that my wedding toast would become a public reckoning of their years of favoritism, right in front of all their friends and family. Subscribe for more daily Reddit stories. To get why I did what I did, you have to understand my family's foundation. It wasn't built on equal love. It was built on the quiet, unspoken rule that there were two tiers of children. My sister, Chloe, was top tier, the golden child, the princess, the one the world revolved around. And then there was me. I wasn't a rebel or a problem child. Honestly, that would have been easier. At least a problem child gets seen. No, I was the invisible child. The responsible one, the low-maintenance son who was just expected to get it, to make do, and to not make waves. My entire childhood was a masterclass in learning to be less, want less, and expect less. It's a strange thing growing up in a sibling's shadow. And it's not that uncommon. Some surveys show as many as 40% of people with siblings believe their parents had a favorite. But knowing that doesn't make it any less lonely. The unfavored child often struggles with feeling rejected and inadequate, which can lead to low self-worth that follows them right into adulthood. I wasn't just a brother. I was a living, breathing control group for my sister's perfect life. The pattern started so early, I don't have memories without it. Birthdays were the most obvious sign. For Chloe's 10th, my parents threw a massive party with a professional magician, a bouncy castle that filled the whole backyard, and personalized gift bags for 30 of her friends. I remember my dad bragging that it cost more than their first car. My 10th birthday was 3 months later. I got a bookstore gift certificate and a quiet family dinner where they mostly talked about how tired they still were from Chloe's party. "You're so much easier, and we appreciate that," my mom said, ruffling my hair. It wasn't a compliment. It was a command to stay convenient. When Chloe turned 16, the favoritism went from subtext to headline. A brand new cherry red convertible showed up in the driveway, wrapped in a giant bow. I later found the financing agreement in my dad's office, just over $25,000. For my 16th, I got a savings bond that would mature in 10 years and a lecture about getting a part-time job. "A car isn't a gift, it's a responsibility," my dad told me with zero irony. "You'll appreciate it more if you earn it yourself." So I did. I worked 40-hour weeks all summer, saving up for a beat-up sedan. My parents acted proud, but what they were really proud of was raising such a self-sufficient son, never admitting my self-sufficiency was born from their neglect. This bled into everything. I was a straight-A student, honor roll, debate club, the works. Each report card earned a simple nod. "Good work," my dad would say, before immediately asking, "Have you seen Chloe's grades?" Chloe struggled. A C+ was a victory, a B- was cause for a celebration dinner. Her struggles required their constant attention, money, and praise. My achievements required nothing. I was a well-oiled machine, running silently in the background. She was the squeaky wheel that got bathed in grease. The financial gap was the most infuriating part. In college, Chloe racked up a few $1,000s in credit card debt on clothes and parties. I overheard the tense calls, then my dad's tired voice saying, "Just tell me the total. We'll take care of it." A year later, I was in a minor car accident. The other driver was at fault, but my insurance would go up unless I paid the $500 repair bill myself. I was a broke college student, and I cautiously asked my parents for help. My mother's response was instant. "You are an adult now. You need to learn to manage your finances." This is a valuable life lesson. I ate ramen for a month to pay for it. The lesson I learned wasn't about financial responsibility. It was that my emergencies were life lessons, while my sisters were their problem to solve. That's when I started keeping a ledger in my head, a cold, hard tally. The $5,000 for the credit card, the $10,000 for her study abroad program in Italy she treated like a vacation, the $40,000 they paid to erase her student loans as a graduation present. My graduation present was a handshake and a book. By my math, by our mid-20s, my sister had received over $90,000 in financial support that I hadn't. It wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about what that money represented: value, investment, and love. The moment that years of quiet anger finally turned into a plan happened on a Sunday evening. Chloe had been dating her boyfriend, Mark, for about 3 years. He was a nice guy, totally unaware of the family drama he was about to marry into. Chloe called a family dinner, and my parents were practically vibrating with excitement. I knew what was coming. Sure enough, Chloe stood up, flashed a diamond ring the size of a small planet, and announced, "We're engaged!" The room exploded. My mother shrieked with joy. My father, a man who usually showed emotion with the frequency of a solar eclipse, got misty-eyed. "This is the happiest day," he declared. For the next hour, it was a blur of wedding talk. Then my dad cleared his throat for one of his big announcements. "Now, Chloe," he began, "your mother and I have been planning for this day for a very long time. We want you to have the wedding of your dreams. We have $80,000 set aside for you." $80,000! The number just hung there. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a sum of money that could change a person's life, and they were dropping it on a one-day party. It's an amount that's more than double the national average cost of a wedding. Chloe burst into happy tears. Mark looked like he'd been hit by a truck. My mom was already talking about Vera Wang. I just sat there, a ghost at the feast. After the initial chaos died down, I saw my opening. I'd been with my girlfriend Sarah for 5 years. We were serious, and we'd talked about marriage. I decided to test the waters. "Wow, that's incredibly generous," I said, keeping my voice even. "I guess I should ask, for future planning, when Sarah and I get married, what should we expect?" The mood snapped. The warm glow vanished, replaced by a thick, awkward silence. "Well, son," my dad said, leaning back like he was explaining something simple to a child, "that's different." "Different how?" I pressed. My mother jumped in. "Honey, a wedding is really for the bride. It's the bride's special day." Then she delivered the line that sealed the deal. "Boys don't need a big wedding. When you and Sarah are ready, you can just go to City Hall. It's practical and, frankly, more masculine. No fuss." Practical, masculine, no fuss. For my sister, a wedding was a dream worth a fortune. For me, it was an errand to be completed with minimal expense. The message was clear. My life milestones were worthless. I looked across the table. Chloe was staring at her ring, avoiding my eyes. My parents looked perfectly pleased with their explanation. They genuinely saw nothing wrong with what they'd just said. I didn't argue. I just nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. "I understand." And I did, with a chilling clarity. I wasn't a son to them in the same way Chloe was a daughter. I was a supporting character. And right there, I decided I was done with their story. The plan for the wedding toast wasn't born of rage, but of cold, hard certainty. They wanted me to be practical. I would be. I would methodically gather the evidence and present it on the most important day of their lives. The year leading up to Chloe's wedding was a parade of extravagance funded by my parents. My life became a series of unwanted updates about the grand production. It started with the venue, a sprawling 19th century mansion with manicured gardens and a ballroom with crystal chandeliers. The booking fee alone was $20,000. My dad, who once gave me an hour-long lecture about buying brand-name coffee, announced this with the pride of a king. Then came the dress. Chloe and my mom flew to a designer boutique in the city for a private session with champagne. The dress she picked cost $12,000. My mom called me specifically to tell me, her voice giddy, "She looks like a real-life princess," she chirped. I just said, "That's great, Mom," while staring at the budget spreadsheet Sarah and I were using to save for a condo down payment. The spending just spiraled. A celebrity chef was flown in for a 5-course meal. They spent $8,000 on out-of-season peonies imported from Holland. A 10-piece band was hired. Every week brought a new, absurd expense, and every one was another twist of the knife, reminding me of the $500 car repair that was a valuable life lesson. I tried to connect a few times. I called my mom to share that Sarah got a promotion, meaning we could afford our down payment sooner. Her reaction? "Oh, that's nice, dear," she said, distracted. "Listen, do you think your Uncle Robert will be offended if he's not at the main family table?" My life achievement was less important than seating chart politics for a party 9 months away. I tried with my dad, too, calling for financial advice. "Can it wait, son?" he said, rushed. "I'm on the other line with the wedding photographer. We're deciding between the platinum and the diamond package. The diamond package includes a drone." A drone! They were debating aerial photography while I was trying to responsibly plan my future, the very thing he claimed to value. My last try was with Chloe. I took her for coffee, hoping to find the sister I used to know. "Chloe, this is all amazing," I started gently. "But don't you think it's a bit much?" Her face hardened. "Are you jealous? Is that it?" she snapped. "The least you could do is be supportive instead of trying to ruin my one perfect day." She couldn't see past her own entitlement. To her, my perspective wasn't just wrong, it was invisible. While they were debating drone packages, Sarah and I got engaged. It was a Tuesday night in our small apartment, no audience. I gave her a simple ring I'd bought with money I'd earned. She said yes. When I told my parents, the reaction was what I expected. "Oh, congratulations," my mom said, with the enthusiasm of someone commenting on the weather. "So, are you two just going to the courthouse, son, then? Very sensible." A month before the wedding, my mother called. "We were thinking," she said, "that you should give a toast at the wedding, as the bride's brother." "You want me to give a toast?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Yes, just something short and sweet, a nice memory. Tell everyone how happy you are for her. You know the drill." Oh, I knew the drill. They were assigning me a role in their play, a bit part with a few lines. "I would be honored," I said. I hung up, opened a new document on my computer titled The Toast, and started writing. I pulled up old bank statements. I scrolled through years of photos. I documented everything. The convertible, the paid-off loans. I wasn't writing a speech. I was preparing an invoice. They wanted something short and sweet. I was going to give them something long, bitter, and unforgettable. The wedding day was a spectacle. The mansion was draped in white roses, looking like a movie set. 300 guests sipped champagne on the lawn. My parents moved through the crowd like royalty, glowing with pride. This was the physical proof of their success, their love, their daughter's supreme importance. I played my part. I smiled, I posed for photos. Sarah stood by my side, her hand occasionally squeezing mine. She was nervous for me, but she understood why I had to do this. At the reception, after the 5-course meal and my father's tearful speech about his little girl, the DJ boomed, "And now we'd like to invite the bride's brother, Alex, to the stage for a special toast." Polite applause. My parents beamed at me from the head table. Chloe gave me a genuine smile, anticipating a loving tribute. I felt a quick pang of sadness for the relationship we could have had. Then it was gone. I walked to the stage and adjusted the microphone. The room fell silent. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice steady. "I'd like to thank you all for being here to celebrate Chloe and Mark. Chloe, you look absolutely stunning. Mark, welcome to the family. You're a brave man." A few chuckles. So far, so good. I've been asked to say a few words, and as I thought about it, I kept coming back to the lessons my parents taught us growing up. More than anything, they taught us about value. I paused. My parents nodded, pleased. They taught us that some things are worth investing in. And I, being the diligent son, have been taking notes. In fact, I have a few with me tonight. I pulled the note cards from my pocket. The mood in the room shifted. "For Chloe's 16th birthday," I continued, my voice becoming flat, like an auditor reading a report, "she received a beautiful convertible, valued at approximately $25,000. For my 16th, I received a valuable life lesson about getting a job to pay for my own car. The parental investment disparity for that milestone, $25,000. A confused murmur went through the crowd. My father's smile was gone. "When Chloe graduated from college," I went on, my eyes finding my parents, "her student loans were generously paid off, a gift of around $40,000. When I graduated with honors, I was given heartfelt congratulations. The parental investment disparity for our education, $40,000. The murmuring grew louder. Chloe's face was pale, her smile replaced by dawning horror. Of course, there were countless other investments. The $5,000 for credit card debt. The $10,000 for her study abroad shopping trip. I was always told to be frugal, to stand on my own 2 feet. And I did. I stood on my own 2 feet, while my sister was carried on a golden throne. I looked directly at my parents. Their faces were crimson with fury. My mother was shaking her head, silently begging me to stop. "By my conservative estimate," I said, my voice ringing out in the dead silent room, Prior to today, the total financial investment my parents made in my sister, which was not extended to me, was $92,400. And then came the planning for this wedding. I gestured around the ballroom. This beautiful, breathtaking $80,000 wedding, a testament to how much they value my sister's happiness. When I asked what I might expect when I get married, I was told, and I quote, "Boys don't need a big wedding. You should just elope. It's more practical." Gasps rippled through the room. My father looked like he was about to explode. So I finally understood. A daughter's special day is worth $80,000. A son's is a matter of practicality. The grand total of parental favoritism, including this wedding, comes to roughly $172,400, and an immeasurable amount of emotional validation. I raised my glass. So, a toast. Not to the happy couple, but to my parents. Thank you for making the numbers so clear. You taught me that self-worth isn't something you get from others. It's something you're forced to build for yourself, brick by painful brick, when you're given nothing. This toast, my final gift to this family, is free of charge. Cheers. I took a sip of champagne, set the glass down, and turned my back on the stunned, silent wreckage of my family. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. For a full 10 seconds, nothing. Then Chloe's sobs broke the spell. My father was on his feet, his face a grotesque shade of purple, his mouth opening and closing, but no words coming out. My mother just stared at me, tears streaming down her face with a look of pure betrayal. I didn't wait. I walked off the stage, straight to Sarah. She took my hand, and we walked towards the exit. We didn't run. We walked with a calm, deliberate pace that felt more powerful than sprinting ever could. As we neared the door, a hand gently grabbed my arm. It was my Aunt Carol. Her eyes were filled with a sad understanding. "Alex," she whispered, "it's about time someone said that. We've all seen it for years. Be happy." That one sentence was everything. It was the confirmation that I wasn't crazy. I gave her a grateful nod, and then Sarah and I were out the door, stepping into the cool night air. Before we even reached our car, my phone started vibrating violently. 14 missed calls from Mom, 8 from Dad, a string of furious texts. "How could you do this? You've ruined your sister's life. You are no son of mine." Then came a voicemail from Chloe, just 20 seconds of hysterical sobbing. I listened to it, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No guilt, no pity, no anger. Just a quiet emptiness. I deleted the voicemail, blocked their numbers, and turned my phone off. In the months that followed, my parents tried to get through to me through relatives, but I politely declined. They weren't looking for reconciliation. They were looking to regain control, to force an apology out of me so their world could make sense again. I was done. Cutting contact is often a last resort for people in these situations, an act of self-preservation. 6 months later, Sarah and I flew to a quiet beach on the coast. Just like my parents suggested, we eloped, but on our own terms. We stood on the sand at sunset, with just an officiant and a photographer, and said our vows. There was no $80,000 price tag, no chandeliers, just us, the ocean, and a sense of profound peace. It was perfect. It was ours. It took time to heal, to unpack 30 years of feeling less than. It's a long process to rebuild a sense of self that was systematically taken apart by the people who were supposed to build you up. But without their constant favoritism in my life, I began to see myself more clearly. I wasn't the invisible son. I was resilient, and I was capable of building my own happiness. I don't know much about what happened to my family. I heard Chloe and Mark are still married, but the relationship with my parents is strained. Apparently, the toast caused a huge rift in their social circle, and the shame was a heavy burden. I don't feel vindicated by that. I don't feel angry anymore. I just feel quiet. I have my own family now with Sarah, a family built on equality, respect, and unconditional love. And that's worth more than any amount of money. What would you have done? Would you have held your peace or delivered the toast? Let us know in the comments. And for more stories about family drama and sweet revenge, don't forget to like and subscribe. In the end, this story isn't just about the money. It's about a lifetime of being told you're second best. The ultimate satisfaction wasn't exposing them in front of 300 people. It was the quiet realization that my value was never theirs to decide in the first place. By walking away, I finally gave myself the validation I'd been denied my entire life. My father-in-law gave us an ultimatum. Name our baby after his racist mother, or he'd cut us off completely. He really thought he had all the power. He thought his money could buy him control over our lives, over our own child. He figured he could just erase 5 years of pain and bigotry with one grand gesture to honor the very woman who caused it all. But he didn't know I had a secret. He had no idea that for years I'd been protecting myself. He didn't know I had a recording that wouldn't just end the argument. It would shatter the perfect image of the sainted woman he thought he knew and change our family forever. See, this isn't just a story about a baby name. It's about the moment I decided my dignity and my child's future was not for sale. It's about the quiet war I'd been fighting for years and the one button I finally pushed that made them all listen. He threatened to take our future away from us, but in the end, it was a voice from the grave that cost him everything. It all started with a love story. My husband, Mark, is the best man I've ever known. He's kind, compassionate, and has a spine of solid steel, though it took me a few years to help him polish it. We met in college. A classic story of two people from totally different worlds who found a home in each other. I was on a scholarship, juggling 2 jobs to get by, and he came from a family that never had to glance at a price tag. But that stuff didn't matter to us. Our connection was instant, and it was deep. When he proposed 2 years after we graduated, saying yes was the easiest thing I'd ever done. Meeting his family, though, that's where things got complicated. His father, George, was one of those guys who commands a room just by walking into it. He was loud, confident, and had that kind of casual wealth that makes you feel a little shabby no matter what you're wearing. He was polite enough at first, in a distant, I'm observing you sort of way. But his mother, Eleanor, she was something else entirely. The first time I met Eleanor, she looked me up and down, and I swear it felt like a physical inspection. She smiled, but it was this tight, thin-lipped thing that didn't even come close to her cold blue eyes. That first dinner was a minefield of little jabs. "Oh, where is your family really from?" she asked, after I'd already told her I grew up in Chicago. "You're so articulate," she'd comment, like she was genuinely shocked I could put a sentence together. Mark, bless him, was kind of oblivious at first. He was just so used to his mom's abrasive personality that he'd brush it off. "That's just how she is," he'd say. But it wasn't just how she was. It was aimed right at me. Over the next 5 years, her behavior went from thinly veiled racism to just outright racism. She would forget to set a place for me at the table. She'd host family get-togethers and accidentally leave me off the email chain. If I ever mentioned a tradition from my culture, she'd wave a dismissive hand and say, "Well, we don't do that here." The worst was when she would pull Mark aside, right in front of me, but just out of earshot, and hiss at him. I didn't need to hear the words. I could see it in the frantic, desperate way she gestured toward me. The mask completely dropped about a year into our marriage. We were at a family barbecue, and I was walking back to the table when I heard my name. I stopped, hidden by a big oak tree. "I just don't understand why he did it," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with venom. "I told him over and over to marry someone from his own kind, someone who fits. It's a betrayal to our family's legacy." Her sister just murmured something in agreement. I felt the air get punched out of my lungs. It's one thing to feel it, to feel the coldness and the exclusion. It's another thing entirely to hear it said out loud, to know that in her eyes, I wasn't just an outsider. I was a stain on her perfect family tree. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding, and I didn't tell Mark what I heard. Not then. I didn't want to ruin the day, and a part of me was scared he wouldn't believe just how bad it was. But her cruelty started to change our marriage. Mark began to see it for himself. He saw the forgotten place settings and the lost invitations. He started calling her out. Their fights got more frequent and more intense. "Mom, you will not speak to my wife that way," he'd say, his voice firm. Her response was always to burst into tears and play the victim, crying about how he was choosing me over his own mother. It was exhausting and toxic, a constant storm cloud over our lives. It was after one particularly nasty phone call where she called me a gold digger trying to dilute the family bloodline that I made a decision. I was telling Mark about it, my voice shaking with rage and hurt. He was trying to comfort me, saying he believed me, but I could see this flicker of exhaustion in his eyes. He was tired of fighting a battle with a ghost. He was fighting his mother based only on my word. And in that moment, I knew I needed proof. Not really for Mark, but for my own sanity. I needed something to hold on to that proved this poison she was pouring into our lives was real. So I started recording our interactions. It felt sneaky and horrible, but it also felt like self-preservation. I'd casually place my phone on the counter during her visits, or just hit record in my pocket when I knew I had to be around her. I caught dozens of little things, the snide remarks, the backhanded compliments. And then I caught the big one. She said it again, this time on a phone call where she didn't know I was on the extension. "Mark needs to be with his own kind," her voice sharp and clear on the recording. She will never be one of us. 2 years ago, Eleanor passed away from a sudden illness. The family was devastated, and almost overnight, she was made into a saint. Saint Eleanor, the matriarch, the loving mother, the pillar of the community. All the bitterness, the cruelty, the racism, it was just erased, replaced by this flawless, idealized woman who never existed. My father-in-law, George, was the main architect of this new history. He talked about her like she was a goddess. And my secret recordings stayed on my phone, a dark, silent reminder of the truth. We hoped her passing would mean peace. We were so wrong. The real fight hadn't even started. Finding out I was pregnant felt like the first day of spring after a long, brutal winter. It was just pure joy. Mark and I just held each other and cried, dreaming about our future, about tiny hands and sleepy smiles. For the first time in years, the shadow of his mother seemed to finally fade. This was our family, our beginning. When we told the family, everyone was thrilled. There were cheers, hugs, and happy tears. Even George seemed genuinely excited. He clapped Mark on the back, his face beaming, and gave me a surprisingly gentle hug. "Eleanor would have been so happy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I managed a tight smile. The thought was bittersweet. I knew the real Eleanor would have been anything but happy. But I let it go. For the sake of peace, for our baby, I just let it go. A few weeks later, George invited us over for a special dinner, just the three of us. He said he wanted to discuss something important about the baby. Mark and I were cautiously optimistic. Maybe he wanted to set up a college fund or offer us the family cradle. We went to his house feeling a sense of hope we hadn't felt in a very long time. The house was dead quiet when we arrived. George led us into the formal dining room, a room they only used for holidays and huge occasions. The table was set with the best china and silver. The air felt heavy and formal, and my optimism started curdling into that familiar anxiety. George wasn't smiling. He looked solemn, almost grave. He poured us sparkling water and then launched into this long, rambling speech about family, legacy, and the importance of honoring those who came before us. He talked about Eleanor for a solid 10 minutes, painting a picture of a woman I didn't recognize at all. He went on about her grace, her charity work, and her unwavering love for her family. I just stared at my plate, hands clasped tight in my lap, feeling like a total fraud for sitting there and listening to these lies. "She was the heart of this family," he said, his eyes getting glassy. "And it is our duty, our sacred duty, to make sure she is never forgotten." He paused, looking from Mark to me, his expression intense. "Which is why," he said, his voice dropping low and deliberate, "I'm not asking, I'm telling you. The baby, if it's a girl, will be named Eleanor." The silence that followed was so loud, it felt like the world had tilted on its axis. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I looked over at Mark, whose face had gone pale, his jaw clenched tight. A wave of nausea washed over me. Name my child after the woman who made my life a living hell? The woman who told my husband to leave me because of my race? The woman who saw me as nothing but a contaminant? It was unthinkable. It was grotesque. Mark found his voice first. Dad, we appreciate the thought, he started, trying to be diplomatic. But we've already been talking about names, and we have a few we've chosen together. George just waved his hand, a gesture of complete dismissal. Those names don't matter. This is about legacy. This is about honoring your mother. Dad, Mark said, his voice getting firmer, we're not naming our daughter Eleanor. George's eyes narrowed, and all that prior warmth vanished. He leaned forward, his voice a low growl. I think you misunderstand. This isn't a negotiation. It's the only way to show proper respect. She is the matriarch of this family. Her name will be carried on. My own voice came out, shaky but firm. George, I said, meeting his eyes, with all due respect, no, absolutely not. He turned that cold stare on me. You have no say in this. You are a guest in this family. This is a family matter. A guest. After 5 years of marriage, of enduring his wife's abuse, of carrying his grandchild, I was still just a guest. The insult was so deep, so dismissive, it stunned me into silence. She's not a guest, Dad. She's my wife, Mark snapped, his voice like cracking ice. And she is the mother of this child. We will be naming our baby together, and the name will not Eleanor. George just leaned back in his chair, a smug, chilling smile on his face. He looked at us like we were just kids throwing a tantrum. We'll see about that, he said softly. You'll come around. You'll realize what's important. The dinner ended pretty quickly after that. The food was barely touched. The ride home was completely silent, both of us trapped in our own spiraling thoughts. The hope we'd felt just hours before was gone, replaced by a familiar, heavy dread. The war wasn't over. It had just entered a terrifying new phase. The days after that disastrous dinner were filled with a tense, waiting silence. We knew George wouldn't just let it go, and we were right. His campaign started subtly, but then it escalated with the force of a tidal wave. It started with the phone calls. He'd call Mark every single day, not to ask how he was, but to launch into the same tired speech about honor and legacy. He'd go on about how disappointed Eleanor would be, how we were throwing her memory away. When Mark started screening his calls, George switched tactics. He began texting, long, rambling paragraphs that would pop up on Mark's phone at all hours. Your child deserves a strong family name, not some trendy nonsense. You are letting your wife's fleeting feelings destroy generations of tradition. A name is the first gift you give a child. Don't give her one that shames her heritage. When attacking Mark directly didn't work, he weaponized the rest of the family. He started recruiting what I called his flying monkeys. Suddenly, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from aunts, uncles, and cousins I barely knew. It felt like a coordinated attack. Mark's Aunt Carol called first. I heard you're having some trouble picking a name, she began, her voice syrupy sweet. I just wanted to say how much it would mean to your father-in-law. He's still grieving, you know. This would be such a comfort to him. I tried to be polite, explaining it was a personal decision, but she just steamrolled right over me. It's just a name, dear. Is it really worth causing all this upset? A cousin sent a text. Family first. Don't let your pride get in the way of honoring Grandma Eleanor. Each call, each text was a little paper cut. Annoying on their own, but together they were bleeding me dry. They were all part of this effort to erase my pain, to minimize the years of racism I'd put up with. To them, Eleanor was a saint, and I was the difficult, ungrateful outsider stirring up trouble. They framed it as me being selfish, as if my refusal was just some petty whim instead of a necessary act of self-respect. It was draining. I started to feel so isolated, like I was being gaslit. Was I crazy? Was I overreacting? Mark was my rock through all of it. He took most of the calls, defending me, defending us, over and over again. I'd hear him in the other room, his voice rising in frustration. "This is our decision, not yours," he'd say. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You weren't there. You didn't see how Mom treated her." But he was outnumbered. It was him against his entire family, all of them just parroting George's narrative. The pressure on him was immense, and I could see the toll it was taking. He was exhausted, torn between the family he grew up with and the one we were trying to build. The final move came about a month later. George summoned Mark to his office for a private chat. Mark went, hoping he could finally make his father understand. He came home hours later, his face pale and ashen. He sat down on the sofa and just stared into space. "What happened?" I asked, my heart pounding. Mark finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of fury and defeat. "He's going to disinherit us," he said, his voice flat. "He's meeting with his lawyer next week. If we don't agree to name the baby Eleanor by the time she's born, we're out. Everything. The house, the stocks, and the trust fund our child would have had. All of it." The amount of money was staggering. It wasn't just a comfortable inheritance, it was life-altering. It was the kind of money that meant our child would never have to worry about student loans or a down payment on a house. Financial security for generations. And George was holding it over our heads like a guillotine. He had turned an emotional boundary into a business transaction. My dignity or my child's future. Pick one. We talked late into the night. Part of me, the part that had scraped and fought for everything I ever had, felt a flicker of temptation. Could I do it? Could I stomach naming my daughter after my tormentor for that kind of security? The thought made me feel physically sick. It felt like selling a piece of my soul. Mark was resolute. "We're not doing it," he said, taking my hand. "It's not happening. I don't care about the money. I will not let him bully you, and I will not name our daughter after someone who hurt you so much. We'll be fine without it." I loved him so much in that moment, but I also knew this wasn't just his decision. That money was meant for our child. Denying her that future felt like I was already failing as a mother. George's tactic was brilliant in its cruelty. He had found our weakest point, our desire to give our child the best life possible, and he was pressing down on it with all his might. The next day, I was scrolling through my phone, deleting old files, and I came across a folder. Recordings. My heart stopped. I hadn't listened to them in years. I pressed play, and there it was, Eleanor's voice, cold and sharp, filling my quiet living room. "Marry someone from his own kind. Dilute the bloodline." Hearing it again didn't bring pain. It brought clarity. It was a vial of pure, uncut truth in a world of lies. This wasn't about my fleeting feelings, as George put it. This was about documented bigotry. And that's when I knew. George thought he was playing chess, moving all his pieces to checkmate us. He didn't know I was holding a card that could flip the entire board. I really didn't want to use it. The idea of deploying something so ugly in a family war felt like a nuclear option. But he was threatening our family, our integrity. He was trying to force me to honor my own abuser. He had left me no other choice. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about the truth, and I was holding the only proof of it that was left. The final showdown felt inevitable, like the last scene of a tragedy written years ago. George, in his infinite arrogance, decided it had to happen on his turf, by his rules. He sent a curt, formal email to me, Mark, and Mark's younger sister, Chloe. Family meeting. My house, Sunday at 2 p.m. We will resolve this matter once and for all. He was trying to frame it as a mediation, but we knew it was a public execution. He wanted an audience for our surrender. Chloe was the wild card. She's 10 years younger than Mark and was away at college for most of the years of Eleanor's worst behavior. She loved her mom, but she also has a strong sense of justice and adores Mark. She'd mostly stayed out of it, telling both sides it was our personal decision. George probably thought her being there would make him look legitimate, or that he could sway her to his side to help pressure us. We walked into that house on Sunday feeling like we were walking into the lion's den. The air in the living room was thick with resentment. George was sitting in his favorite oversized leather armchair, his throne, ready to pronounce judgment. Chloe was perched nervously on the edge of the sofa, wringing her hands. She gave us a weak, sympathetic smile as we sat down across from her. George didn't waste any time. He launched straight into his closing argument. He talked about legacy, about how a family is a chain, and Eleanor was the strongest link. He talked about her supposed kindness, her generosity, and her all-encompassing love. He was delivering a eulogy for a saint I'd never met. She was the most welcoming, loving woman I have ever known, he declared, his voice booming. She accepted everyone into this family with open arms. To deny her this small honor, to refuse her name to her first grandchild, is a slap in the face. It is the ultimate disrespect, not just to her memory, but to this entire family. Every word was a lie, another brick in the wall of his delusion. And I had had enough. My blood was boiling, but when I spoke, my voice was eerily calm. "That's not true, George," I said quietly. He stopped mid-sentence. "What did you say?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "That's not the woman I knew," I repeated, a little stronger now. "The woman I knew wasn't welcoming. She did not accept me. She spent 5 years trying to get my husband to leave me because of my race." George's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. "How dare you?" he hissed. "How dare you come into my house and slander my wife? You are a liar. You are ungrateful. You have been poisoning my son against his own mother since the day you met him." Chloe gasped, looking between me and her father. "Dad, that's enough!" "No, it's not enough," George roared, struggling to his feet. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You will not disrespect her. You will agree right now to name your child Eleanor. And if you do not, you will leave this house, and you will get nothing. You will be cut off, completely and forever." The ultimatum just hung there in the air, heavy and toxic. The room was silent except for his heavy breathing. I looked at Mark. He gave me a subtle, determined nod. He was with me. It was time. I took a slow, deep breath. "George, you're right about one thing," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "My words don't mean anything to you. It's my word against your perfect memory of her. It's not a fair fight." I reached into my bag and took out my phone. "So why don't we stop listening to me? Why don't we listen to Eleanor herself?" George stared at the phone in my hand, confused. Chloe leaned forward, her brow furrowed. I pressed play. And then Eleanor's voice filled the room. It was from that phone call, 2 years before she died. Her voice was sharp, brittle, and full of cold fury. "I don't understand why you are still with her, Mark. I raised you better than this. She is not our kind. She doesn't belong." George froze, his mouth hanging slightly open. The recording continued. "Think of our family, our bloodline. What will people say? You are my son, and you should have married someone from your own kind, someone who understands our values, not this outsider who is only after your money." Chloe let out a small, strangled sob. She clapped her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror as she stared at her father. But the worst was still coming. "I told you to end it before it was too late. She will never fit in. She will never be one of us. And I will never, ever accept her as a true member of this family." I pressed stop. The silence that fell on the room was absolute. It was heavier than any argument, louder than any shout. It was the sound of a carefully built world shattering into a million pieces. George just stood there, motionless, his face completely drained of color. He looked like he'd been turned to stone. The booming patriarch was gone, replaced by a frail old man who had just been confronted by a ghost. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He just stared at the phone in my hand like it was a venomous snake. I looked at him, then at Chloe, who was now openly crying, and then at Mark, whose face was a mask of cold disappointment. We didn't need to say another word. The truth had been spoken. I stood up, and Mark stood with me. We walked out of the living room, down the hall, and out the front door, leaving the wreckage of George's lies behind us. As the door clicked shut, we knew, in the deafening silence, that we had finally won. The days right after the confrontation were eerily quiet. We were bracing for an explosion, angry voicemails, furious texts, a full-on family war. But we got nothing. The silence from George was absolute, a total void where his bullying used to be. It was more unnerving than any fight. He didn't call, he didn't text. It was like we just ceased to exist. Chloe was the first person to break the silence. She called me 2 days later, her voice still shaky. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I had no idea. I mean, I knew Mom could be difficult and snobbish, but I never knew that. The things she said. I'm so ashamed, and I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner." We talked for over an hour. She cried, she apologized, and she told me that after we left, George just collapsed back into his chair and didn't say a word for hours. The other family members, the flying monkeys, had mixed reactions. A few of them, after Chloe told them what happened, called to give these stilted, awkward apologies. "We just didn't know," became a popular excuse. They'd been manipulated by George, fed a story that was easy for them to believe. But others doubled down. One particularly nasty cousin accused me of being manipulative and cruel, saying I had desecrated Eleanor's memory. In her mind, my act of self-defense was a worse crime than Eleanor's years of racism. We blocked her number. About a week later, a formal-looking envelope showed up in the mail. It was from George's lawyer. My heart hammered against my ribs as Mark opened it. This was it, the official notice of disinheritance. But it wasn't. Inside was a single typed sheet of paper from George himself. The letter was cold and impersonal. It read, "I have been forced to reconsider my position. The matter of the name is dropped. The terms of my will remain unchanged at this present time." That was it. No apology, no remorse, no acknowledgement of the pain he caused or the lies he told. The words "forced to reconsider" said it all. He wasn't sorry. He was cornered. His perfect image of his wife had been destroyed in front of his other child, and the threat of that recording getting out was clearly enough to make him fold. His ultimate weapon, the inheritance, was gone. I had disarmed him. He had nothing left to hold over us. We never wrote back. There was nothing to say. The relationship was shattered beyond repair. It was never about the money, and it wasn't even about the name anymore. It was about the complete break in trust and respect. He had shown us he was willing to use his financial power to enforce a demand that was rooted in his wife's bigotry. He had tried to buy our silence in my own dehumanization. There's no coming back from that. 2 months later, I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl. She was perfect. We looked at her tiny, perfect face, and we knew her name instantly. We named her Hope. It was a name that had nothing to do with family legacy or tradition. It was for us, for her. It represented everything we had fought for, a future free from the poisons of the past. It was our own legacy, a new beginning. We are now no contact with George. He has sent a few gifts for Hope, which we've donated. He's tried to reach out through Chloe, but we've made it clear that we're not interested in a relationship built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. Mark grieves for the father he thought he had, but he stands firm in his decision to protect our new family. Our lives are quieter now and so much more peaceful. We have our daughter, we have each other, and we have our integrity. Some things, we've learned, are worth more than any inheritance. So, that's the story. It was a long, painful road. But looking at my daughter now, I know we made the right choice. We chose her peace over his demands, her dignity over his dollars. We broke a toxic chain and started a new one based on love and respect. But I have to ask you, what do you think? Was I right to play that recording? Was it a necessary evil to expose the truth and protect my family? Or did I go too far by using a dead woman's words against her husband? What would you have done? Would you have taken the money for your child's future and just lived with the name? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read all of them. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's next. Thanks for listening. I'll never forget the look on my stepmother's face. It was a placid mask of false sympathy, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "The house is going to your stepbrother," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. "It's for the best." The air in the hospital waiting room was thick with antiseptic and quiet despair. My grandmother was just down the hall, in the final, fading days of her life, and here they were, already carving up her world and carving me out of it. A promise she had whispered to me 100 times over the years, the one constant I'd held on to, was just shattered in a single, sterile sentence. What happened next wasn't just an argument. It was a war. It was the moment our family, or what was left of it, was destroyed for good. Before all the ugliness, there was just us. My grandmother, Eleanor, wasn't just my grandmother. She was my anchor. While my parents were lost in the storm of their divorce and my father's quick remarriage to Susan, Grandma Eleanor's house was my sanctuary. It was a sprawling, 2-story Victorian with a wraparound porch and a garden that smelled of roses and earth. Every scar on my knee has a story that started in her backyard, and every happy childhood memory is framed by the floral wallpaper in her kitchen. She was one of those women made of quiet strength and resilience. She'd outlived my grandfather by 2 decades and managed her life with a fierce independence I admired more than anything. While my father and his new wife were off building their shiny new life, I was the one who spent weekends with Grandma. I learned to bake her famous apple pie, a recipe she swore was a family secret, but was really just about using an obscene amount of cinnamon. I was the one who sat with her on the porch swing, listening to stories of her youth, of a world that seemed impossibly far away, and as close as her hand in mine. "This house, it has a soul," she would tell me, looking out at the familiar roofline. "It's seen joy and sorrow, births and farewells. It needs someone who loves it, who understands its stories." Then she'd look right at me, her eyes clear and certain. "And that someone is you. When I'm gone, this house is yours. It's not just a gift, it's a legacy." This wasn't a one-off comment. It was a promise woven into the fabric of our lives. It was there when I graduated high school, and she tucked a little hand-drawn map of the property into my card. It was there when I finished college, and she told me, "Now you have the education, but this house will always be your home." My father and Susan knew all about it. In the early days, they'd just nod and smile. "That's sweet of Mom," my father would say with a dismissive wave. Susan would add, "Of course, dear, Eleanor loves you so much." Her son, Kevin, my stepbrother, never paid any attention. He was a few years older, and his world revolved around his car, video games, and the steady stream of cash he got from his mom. He visited Grandma Eleanor twice a year, her birthday and Christmas. He'd stay just long enough to get a card with a $100 bill inside before vanishing again. The whole dynamic shifted when Grandma's health started to fail. It was slow at first, a little more forgetful, a little less steady on her feet. I became the one who managed her doctor's appointments, organized her pills into daily boxes, did her grocery shopping, and just sat with her for hours, even when our conversations started to loop. My father and Susan would call, their voices filled with hollow concern. "How is she?" they'd ask. "We should visit," they'd promise, but they rarely did. They were always too busy with work, with social events, with the new family life they'd been living for a decade. Kevin never came, not once. When I brought it up with Susan, she just waved it off. "Oh, you know Kevin," she'd sigh. "He's not good with all this. It makes him uncomfortable." Uncomfortable? I was sleeping on a cot in my grandmother's living room 3 nights a week, waking at every cough, my own life completely on hold. Uncomfortable didn't even begin to cover it, but I did it without a second thought because I loved her. The house wasn't some prize to be won. It was a continuation of that love. It was the place her memory would live on, protected by the one person who cherished it most. I was so naive. I thought love and loyalty were what mattered in a family. I was about to get a crash course that for some people, the only currency that counts is cold, hard cash. The beginning of the end came with a phone call from my father. "We need to talk," he said, his voice tight. "Susan and I are at the hospital. Meet us in the family waiting room." My heart stopped. I thought this was it, the call I'd been dreading for months. I rushed over, my mind a blur of worst-case scenarios, all of them ending with my grandmother's fading pulse. When I got there, I found them sitting on those stiff, awful chairs, trying to look somber. But something was off. Susan was fiddling with the strap of her designer handbag, and my father wouldn't meet my eyes. Is it over?" I whispered. "No, no, she's stable," my father said, way too quickly. "The doctor said she's resting, but honey, that's what we need to talk about. The future, practical matters." Susan leaned forward and put her hand on my arm. It felt like ice. "Your grandmother's affairs need to be in order," she began, her tone oozing a practiced synthetic sympathy. "Your father and I have been helping her with some of the paperwork." A knot of dread tightened in my gut. "Paperwork? What paperwork? Her lawyer has everything." My father finally looked at me, his face a miserable mix of guilt and resolve. "We had to make a change to the will, honey. It was your grandmother's wish." "A change? What change?" I asked, but a cold, terrifying suspicion was already blooming in my chest. And that's when Susan dropped the bomb. "The house is going to your stepbrother," she said. "It's for the best." The words just hung there, sucking all the air out of the room. I stared at them, sure I'd misheard. "What? What are you talking about? Grandma promised me the house, for years. You know that." "Things change," Susan said, her sympathetic mask starting to crack. "Kevin needs a fresh start. He's had it rough, and a stable home would do wonders for him. You're so responsible, so capable. You'll land on your feet anywhere." "He needs this. He needs it?" My voice started to rise, drawing a look from a passing nurse. "He hasn't visited her in 3 years. He doesn't even know what color the front door is. I've been here every single day. I've held her hand, I've fed her, How could you?" That last part was for my father, a raw, ragged plea. He flinched. "Listen," he started, his voice low and urgent. "Your grandmother is very sick. She's suggestible. We talked it through with her and she agreed. She signed the papers this morning." Suggestible? They didn't say she wanted it. They said she was suggestible. They were admitting right there that they had manipulated a dying woman. They had used her love for me, her one true final wish, and twisted it to serve their own greed. "She signed it?" I let out a bitter, broken laugh. "She can barely hold a pen. Her hands shake so badly she can't even hold a cup of tea. And you're telling me she signed a legal document this morning? Let me see it. Show me the paper she signed." Susan's eyes narrowed. The pretense was gone, replaced by a steely defensiveness. "That's not your concern. It's a private family matter." "A private family matter?" I was shouting now. "I am her family. I'm the only one who's been acting like it. You two vultures circle her, waiting for her to die, and you use her last vulnerable moments to steal from her? To steal from me?" "You are being hysterical," Susan snapped, pulling her hand away like I'd burned her. "We are trying to do what's best for the whole family." "The whole family?" I looked at my father, begging him with my eyes to see how insane, how monstrous this was. "Dad, you're letting this happen? This is your mother. This is me, your daughter. And you're choosing them? You're choosing him?" My father's face just crumpled. He looked old and weak, a puppet on a string. "It's done," he mumbled, staring at the floor. "It's better this way. Less fighting." Less fighting? The irony was so bitter it made me want to be sick. They had just detonated a bomb in the middle of our lives, and he was talking about avoiding a fight. And at that exact moment, as if summoned by the drama, Kevin shuffled into the waiting room, earbuds in, completely oblivious. He looked from my face, twisted in rage and grief, to his mother's smug expression, and then to my father's defeated slump. "What's up?" he asked, pulling one earbud out. Susan's face transformed, melting into a warm, motherly glow. "It's all sorted, sweetie," she cooed. "The house is yours, just like we talked about." Kevin's eyes flickered to me, and for a split second I saw a flash of something. Guilt, maybe? Or just the discomfort of a coward caught in the crossfire. Then a slow, greasy smile spread across his face. "Cool," he said. "Really? That's awesome." He didn't thank me. He didn't acknowledge my years of care for the woman whose house he was just gifted. He didn't even acknowledge my pain. He just stood there, basking in his unearned prize. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The shock and grief curdled into pure, white-hot rage. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a robbery, plain and simple, orchestrated by the people who were supposed to love me. "Get out," I whispered, my voice trembling with a fury so deep it scared me. "Excuse me?" Susan said, offended. "Get out," I roared, the sound primal and raw, "both of you, and take your leech of a son with you. Don't you dare come near her room. Don't you dare speak to me. You are not my family. Not anymore. You are nothing to me." My father looked up, his face a mask of shock. "Don't say that," he pleaded. "I will say it, and I will mean it," I spat back. "You made your choice. Now live with it." Looked scared. Good. He should be. I turned my back on them, an act that felt as real as building a brick wall, and walked down the hall to my grandmother's room, the sound of my own heart pounding like war drums in my ears. If you think this story is unbelievable, hit that subscribe button, because you won't want to miss how this war ends. Sometimes the deepest betrayals come from the people sworn to protect you. The next few days were a waking nightmare. I didn't leave the hospital. I slept in the vinyl chair by Grandma's bed, holding her hand, even though she was no longer responsive. I talked to her, told her about my day, read her favorite poems, and just wept. I cried for her and the life that was slipping away, and I cried for myself, for the family I had just lost while she was still breathing. My father's name would flash on my phone, and a fresh wave of rage would wash over me. I declined the call every time. Susan sent long, rambling texts that swung between fake concern and accusations that I was being dramatic. "Your grandmother wouldn't want this," one read. The audacity was breathtaking. They desecrated her dying wish and were now using her as a shield. I blocked both their numbers. The final ghoulish act came 2 days later. I'd stepped out to talk to a nurse. When I came back, Susan and my father were standing by her bed. They weren't there to say goodbye. They had a man with them, a notary, and they were holding a document. My father was trying to guide my grandmother's limp hand, a pen stuck between her fingers, toward a signature line. "What are you doing?" I screamed, the sound echoing in the quiet room. They jumped. The notary, a small, nervous man, took a step back, his eyes wide. "This doesn't concern you," Susan said, her voice hard as ice. "We are finalizing her wishes." "Her wishes?" I lunged forward and snatched the paper from her. It was a durable power of attorney, granting my father full control over her assets, effective immediately. They weren't just stealing the house anymore. They were trying to loot everything. "She can't sign this. She's unconscious," I yelled, waving the paper. I turned to the notary. "Are you part of this? Are you seriously going to notarize the signature of a woman who hasn't opened her eyes in 48 hours? The man turned pale. "They told me she was lucid," he stammered, frantically packing his bag. I can't do this." He practically ran out of the room. I turned back to them, my whole body shaking. "You are ghouls," I whispered, "absolute monsters." My father just stood there, utterly defeated, a puppet with its strings cut. But Susan's face was a mask of pure hatred. "You've made a terrible mistake," she hissed. "You'll regret this. You'll be left with nothing." "I already have nothing," I told her, my voice eerily calm. "You made sure of that. Now get out. If I see you in this hospital again, I will call security and have you removed for harassing a dying patient." They left, and I was alone again. My grandmother passed away peacefully the next morning, just as the sun was rising. I was holding her hand. The silence she left behind was deafening. The emptiness felt like a physical weight. The anger, the betrayal, it all faded for a moment, replaced by a grief so profound I felt like I was drowning. I had lost the one person who ever made me feel unconditionally loved. And now I had to face the fallout of their greed all on my own. The funeral was surreal. I arranged it, paid for it, and sat in the front row, alone. My father, Susan, and Kevin sat on the other side of the aisle, a perfect portrait of a grieving family, accepting condolences from people who had no idea of the war raging just beneath the surface. After the service, a distant cousin came up to me, her face pinched with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, dear," she said. "And I'm so sorry about the house. Your father told me it had to be sold to cover Eleanor's medical debts." I just stared at her. The lies. They were already building a new reality, a fiction where they were the heroes. They weren't just stealing my inheritance. They were trying to steal my grandmother's legacy and my own truth. In that moment, I just felt powerless. They had their story, they had the papers, and they had each other. I had nothing but a broken heart and a promise that now felt like a child's fantasy. I felt the fight drain out of me. I had lost. It was a Tuesday, 2 weeks after the funeral, when the phone rang. An unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Am I speaking with—" a man's voice asked, and he stated my full name. "Yes, who is this?" I said, my voice flat and tired. "My name is Arthur Covington. I was your grandmother's attorney." My heart gave a painful lurch. I braced myself for the final, official confirmation that I'd been cut out of the will. "I'm calling because the mandatory waiting period has passed," he said calmly, "and I need to schedule a meeting with you to discuss the execution of her estate." "I'm not sure there's much to discuss," I said, the bitter edge returning to my voice. "My father and his wife already informed me of the new arrangements regarding the house." There was a pause. "Ah, yes," Mr. Covington said, and I could almost hear him frowning. "I was afraid of that. Your grandmother anticipated there might be some confusion." Anticipated? Confusion? What did that mean? "Your grandmother was a very sharp woman," he continued, "very sharp. She came to see me about 6 months ago, right after her diagnosis. She was worried about undue influence from certain family members. She was afraid that as her health declined, they might pressure her into making changes she did not truly want. I sat bolt upright, my entire body tingling. She said that? Explicitly. So we took some proactive steps to protect her wishes. Specifically, her wishes regarding the house." He cleared his throat. "Legally, the will your father has is, in fact, her last will and testament. If it states the residue of her estate goes to him, that is what will happen." My heart plummeted. "So that's it, then?" "Not at all," Mr. Covington said, and now I could hear a sharp, almost cheerful tone in his voice. "You see, the house isn't part of her estate's residue. It was removed from her estate 5 months and 3 weeks ago." I was completely lost. "What are you talking about?" "Your grandmother was a fan of old legal dramas," he said with a small chuckle. "She loved a clean solution. 5 months ago, she established an irrevocable living trust. The sole asset of this trust is the house. The sole trustee and sole beneficiary of that trust upon her passing is you." I couldn't process the words. A trust? But the will. "The will they had her change is irrelevant, at least concerning the house," he explained patiently. "You can't give away something in a will that you no longer own. As of 5 months ago, your grandmother, Eleanor, no longer legally owned the house. The Eleanor Vance Trust owned the house, and you, my dear, are the sole heir to that trust." Tears started streaming down my face, but for the first time in weeks, they weren't from grief or rage. They were tears of overwhelming, shocking relief and love. A love for my grandmother so fierce it physically hurt. She had known. She had seen them for who they were, and she had protected me. "But how?" I stammered. "We filed a quitclaim deed with the county. It's public record. She sold the house to the trust for $1. It's airtight. There is nothing they can do. The house has been legally yours since the moment she passed away." I was sobbing now, great heaving gulps of air. She'd given me one last gift, more precious than any house. She had given me justice, her final, brilliant act of love. "When can you come in?" Mr. Covington asked gently. "We have some papers for you to sign." The meeting for the will reading was a week later. I walked into that office a different person. The despair was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was my grandmother's chosen successor. My father, Susan, and Kevin were already there, looking smug. Susan gave me a condescending little smile as I sat down, as if to say, "Don't make a scene." Mr. Covington began. He read through the will, a few small bequests, and then the final clause. I leave the entire residue of my estate, including all bank accounts and personal effects, to be divided equally between my son Michael and my beloved grandchild, he read. However, as the accounts were held jointly with my grandchild for my care, the residue of the estate amounts to approximately $7,000. The silence was electric. Susan's smile vanished. 7,000? She scoffed. That's ridiculous. She owned a valuable house. Ah, Mr. Covington said, folding his hands. About the house. As I explained to my client's son, the will has no bearing on that property. My father shifted in his seat. What do you mean? We have the amended will. She signed it. The house goes to Kevin. Mr. Covington turned his calm gaze on him. The document you had your dying mother sign is indeed a valid change to her will. However, it is a functionally useless piece of paper. One cannot give away what one does not own. Eleanor, being of sound mind, transferred the house to a private trust 6 months ago. She did this to protect her legacy from what she termed anticipated familial avarice. He let that phrase hang in the air. Familial avarice. Greed. Susan's face turned blotchy red. A trust? What are you talking about? Who is this trust for? Mr. Covington ignored her and slid a folder across the desk to me. The Eleanor Vance Trust names one person as its sole beneficiary, and that person is here in this room. I opened the folder. Inside were the trust documents, a copy of the deed, and a set of keys. I looked up at Susan's face, now a mask of fury, at my father, who looked like he'd been punched in the gut, and at Kevin, who just looked confused, a pawn in a game he was too dim to understand. "So the house is mine," I said, my voice clear and steady. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "That's impossible," Susan shrieked, slamming her hand on the desk. "She was manipulated. This old man took advantage of her." Mr. Covington's expression didn't flicker. "On the contrary, madam. I have a video recording of my session with Eleanor, where she, in perfect lucidity, explains her fears. She states, and I quote, 'My son is a good man, but he is weak. His wife is not. I fear they will try to take what is not theirs and give it to a boy who has never shown me an ounce of kindness. Would you care for me to play it?' The color drained from Susan's face. My father sank lower in his chair, covering his face with his hands. "This is a trick," Susan insisted, her voice rising. "We will contest this. We'll take you to court." "You are welcome to try," Mr. Covington said coolly. "You will lose. And in the process, your actions during your mother's final days, the pressure, the manipulation, will all become a matter of public record. I imagine that would be quite embarrassing." I stood up and gathered the folder and the keys. I looked directly at my father, who was now quietly weeping. "She knew," I said to him, my voice empty of anger, replaced by a profound, hollow sadness. "She knew you would betray her. She knew you would betray me, and she protected me from you." I turned and walked out, leaving the sound of Susan's impotent screeching and my father's pathetic sobs behind me. I didn't look back. The aftermath was what you'd expect. Susan hired a lawyer who took one look at Mr. Covington's airtight documents and the video and promptly advised her to drop the case after charging her a massive retainer. The financial strain and public humiliation was the final crack in their sham marriage. They divorced within a year. My father tried to contact me, long pleading emails and drunken voicemails. He was sorry. He'd made a terrible mistake. He just wanted his daughter back. I never replied. Forgiveness requires trust, and he had burned that to the ground. He stood by and did nothing. That was a sin I could find no absolution for. Kevin, without the promise of a free house, had to get a job. I heard he was working loss prevention at a big box store, a far cry from the life he was grinning about in that hospital waiting room. And me? I moved into the house. At first it was filled with echoes of her, but slowly I started making it my own. I painted the kitchen a sunny yellow and planted new roses in the garden. I kept her favorite armchair by the window where she used to sit. The house is not just a house. It's a monument to a grandmother's love, a love so strong and clever it reached beyond the grave to protect me. They tried to steal my inheritance, but they didn't get it. My true inheritance wasn't the building. It was the legacy of strength and fierce loyalty she passed down to me. And that was something they could never touch. Justice doesn't always come easy, and family is so much more than just a word. If you have a story of your own or just want to hear more, make sure you're subscribed and ring that bell. You never know when you'll need a reminder that you're not alone. The sound I'll never forget is the click. Not a loud, angry slam, but a soft, final click as the magnetic lock on the door engaged. It's a sound that tells you you're not part of the outside world anymore. You belong to us now. In here, the air tastes sterile and recycled, like fluorescent lights and quiet desperation. They take your shoelaces and your belt, but they can't take your thoughts. And my thoughts were a single, repeating question. How did I get here? I wasn't a danger to myself or anyone else. My only illness was having a sister who wanted what was mine and was willing to burn my life down to get it. This isn't a story about mental illness. It's a story about betrayal. It's about how the very system designed to protect people can be twisted and used as a weapon. And it's about how my entire future ended up in the hands of a psychiatrist who had every reason to believe I was delusional, until she took an enormous risk that violated all kinds of rules and found the truth on my phone. The psychiatrist looked at me, her face a mask of professional neutrality. "You understand," she said, her voice calm, "that hospital policy and privacy laws like HIPAA strictly prohibit me from going through a patient's personal belongings, especially a cell phone." I nodded, my throat tight. "I know," I managed to say, "but everything you need to know, everything that proves I'm not crazy, is in there. Please, you're my only hope." Her eyes held mine, and I could see the conflict warring behind them. My sanity, my freedom, it all depended on what she would find in a single text message. This is the story of how my sister's lies got me locked in a psych ward and how one text message was my only way out. It all started, as so many family tragedies do, with money. $400,000, my half of the inheritance our parents left after their car accident. In the immediate aftermath of that world-shattering loss, my sister, Clara, and I were inseparable. We clung to each other in the wreckage of our lives. Clara, 2 years older, had always been the pragmatic one. While I was the artist, she saw the world in numbers. She handled the funeral, the paperwork, the soul-crushing logistics of death. I was just lost in my own grief, so I was grateful. I didn't notice at first the way her eyes would linger on the lawyer's documents, the way she started talking about the money not as our inheritance, but as a fund that needed to be managed. Our parents were simple people. Their will was painfully clear. Everything was to be split 50-50. But to Clara, that was inefficient. "You've never been good with money, Alex," she'd say, her voice laced with that old, familiar tone of sisterly concern. Now, though, it felt different. It felt like she was laying a foundation for something. "I was thinking," she said one night, "maybe we should pool the money. I can manage it for both of us, make it grow. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." I shook my head. "No, Clara, I want to buy a studio, a place to live and work. It's what Mom and Dad would have wanted for me." For a split second, her smile vanished, replaced by something I couldn't quite name. Then it was back. "Of course, sweetie. It's just, you've been so emotional lately. Maybe you're not in the right headspace for huge financial choices." That became her new favorite word for me. Emotional, fragile, not thinking clearly. She'd say it with a sympathetic hand on my arm, but the word was a quiet accusation. She started twisting my grief into evidence of instability. If I cried, I was spiraling. If I stayed up late painting, I was manic. I was grieving, deeply and messily, but I wasn't unstable. Under her constant, watchful gaze, I started to feel like I was walking on a tightrope. Every normal expression of sorrow was being catalogued and documented. She was building a case against me, lie by lie. She wasn't just my sister anymore. She was my judge, and, though I didn't yet know it, my jailer. She wanted it all, and she'd decided my sanity was a small price to pay. The day my world imploded started with a stupid argument. I'd found an art residency in New Mexico and mentioned the $50 application fee. Clara exploded. "$50, Alex? Are you serious?" she snapped. "You're just throwing money away on fantasies. You need to be responsible." "It's my money, Clara," I shot back, my patience gone. "My half. I'm investing in my future." "Your future?" she scoffed, her face twisting into a mask of pure contempt. "You're too unstable to handle this money. You need to be protected from yourself." The words hit me like a slap. The fight escalated. I yelled, I cried, I told her to get out of my apartment. When she left, slamming the door, I collapsed, drained. The horrifying realization finally hit me. My sister saw me as an obstacle to the money. An hour later, they came. The heavy official knock made my heart sink. I opened the door to 2 paramedics and 2 police officers. My blood ran cold. "Alexandra Jennings?" one officer asked. "We received a call from your sister. She's concerned for your well-being. She said you've been exhibiting erratic behavior and making threats of self-harm." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "What? No, we had a fight. I'm fine." His eyes were flat. Your sister said you were threatening to end your life. She's very worried." It was a monstrous, calculated lie. I hadn't said anything of the sort. But my tear-stained face and the messy apartment painted a picture. Clara had twisted my perfectly human reaction into a portrait of insanity. "Please," I begged, my voice trembling. "She's lying. This is about our inheritance." They exchanged a look I'd come to know well. Pity tinged with skepticism. My desperate claims of a conspiracy just sounded like classic paranoia. "We just need to take you for an evaluation," the paramedic said gently. "A 72-hour hold. It's for your safety." There was no room for argument. They escorted me out of my building as a neighbor peeked through her blinds. Humiliation washed over me, hot and sickening. In the back of the ambulance, I saw Clara across the street, watching. Her face was perfectly, chillingly calm. She had won. After hours in the ER, a transport team led me through a series of locked doors into the psychiatric unit. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Antiseptic layered over a faint odor of human sadness. A nurse went through my things. "No phone," she said, placing it in a locker. "No shoelaces." She handed me paper-thin scrubs. I was no longer Alex Jennings. I was a patient, a risk. My room was stark, a bed on a concrete slab and a high, reinforced window. That first night, I listened to the sounds of the ward. A distant sob, the squeak of nurses' shoes, the rattle of the medication cart. It was the sound of limbo. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare. The system is designed with a core assumption. You are there because you are unwell, so your perception is flawed. When you insist you're sane, it's not seen as proof of health, but as a lack of insight, another symptom. My first psychiatrist, Dr. Miller, was overworked and cynical. He glanced at my file, filled with Clara's lies. "So, Alex, your sister says you've been threatening to harm yourself." "That's not true," I said, keeping my voice even. "My sister is trying to have me declared incompetent to get control of our inheritance." He made a note. "It's common for patients to feel a sense of paranoia. They often feel betrayed. It's part of the illness." My heart sank. He wasn't listening. He was fitting me into a box. My story was just noise. Clara visited on the third day with a bouquet of funereal lilies and a look of deep theatrical concern. In front of the nurses, she was the perfect sister. But when a nurse was distracted, her grip tightened on my hand. "Just sign the conservatorship forms, Alex," she whispered, her voice venomous. "Give me control of the money and I'll get you out of here." It was a threat and a promise. My blood ran cold. This was her endgame. Break me down until I'd sign away my future. "Never," I hissed back. Her face hardened. "Fine, rot in here. Who do you think they'll believe? Me, the stable, worried sister, or you, the emotional wreck?" She left, and a terrifying clarity washed over me. The truth, from my mouth, sounded like a lie. They had my file. They had Clara's narrative. My 72-hour hold was ending, but I knew they wouldn't let me go. Dr. Miller had already recommended an extension. I needed someone to see past the file, to see me, and the only proof I had was locked away at the nurse's station. My phone. My 72-hour hold became a 14-day hold for intensive treatment. Each day was the same monotonous cycle. Clara's visits were a form of torture, each one a reminder that she held the key and all I had to do was sign the papers. The constant invalidation was starting to get to me. Was I overreacting? The environment is designed to make you doubt your own mind. Then Dr. Miller was reassigned. My case was transferred to a new psychiatrist, Dr. Eris Thorne. She was different. She was younger, with sharp, intelligent eyes that actually saw me. She didn't start with my chart. She started with me. "Tell me what happened, Alex," she said, "in your own words." For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. I calmly told her everything. My parents, the inheritance, Clara's shift in behavior, the argument, the lies, and the threats right here in this ward. When I finished, she was quiet. "Your sister presents a very different narrative," she said carefully. "She appears to be a credible, concerned family member. The staff notes your resistance to therapy, your fixation on this financial conspiracy." "It's not a fixation, it's the truth," I said, catching myself. I took a breath. "Dr. Thorne, I know how this looks. I know my story fits a certain profile. But what if it's real?" She looked at me thoughtfully. "The nature of a delusion is that it feels entirely real." My hope died. She was just like the others. "But what if I could prove it?" I blurted out. "The proof is in the nurse's station, my phone." She raised an eyebrow. "Your phone?" "Yes, my sister is arrogant. She texts me. The threats, the manipulation, it's all there. And texts between her and her boyfriend, where she talks about the plan. She thinks I'm too broken to ever be believed." This was it, my last shot. Dr. Thorne leaned back. "Alex, you're asking me to commit a major breach of hospital policy and patient privacy laws. Even with your consent, searching a patient's phone is a boundary I've never crossed. I could lose my license for this." "Please," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "I am begging you, not as a doctor, but as a human. My entire life is on the line. She is using this system to steal my future. If you look and there's nothing there, then you can write me off as delusional. But if I'm right, you'll be saving my life." The silence was suffocating. I saw the conflict on her face, protocol versus intuition. After what felt like an eternity, she stood up. "Wait here," she said. My heart hammered against my ribs. I heard her footsteps, the click of the locker, and then her return. She walked back in, my phone in her hand. "For the record," she said, her voice firm, "you are giving me your explicit, uncoerced consent to access the private messages on this device to verify your claims." "Yes," I said, my voice shaking, "I consent." She unlocked the phone and opened my messages. I watched her face. Her eyes scanned the screen. A slight furrow appeared on her brow. She kept scrolling. Her jaw tightened. She stopped, her eyes fixed on one exchange, a conversation between Clara and her boyfriend. I knew the words by heart. "Clara, it's almost done. The lawyer said after a 30-day hold, the petition for permanent conservatorship will be a slam dunk. The doctors will have all the evidence they need." Boyfriend, what if she convinces them she's fine? She won't. She's too emotional. By the time I'm done, they'll be begging me to take control. That $400K is as good as ours. Dr. Thorne read it. Then she read it again. She slowly lifted her head, and the look in her eyes was one I hadn't seen since I'd arrived. It wasn't pity. It wasn't skepticism. It was pure, cold fury. She didn't see a patient. She saw a victim. She stood up and spoke to the nurse outside in a low, urgent tone. When she came back, she looked at me. "Alexandra," she said, and hearing my full name felt like a restoration. "I need to make a few calls. First to our hospital's patient advocate, and then to our legal department. What your sister has done appears to be criminal. This goes far beyond a family dispute." She paused. "You are safe now. We are going to figure this out." The tears that came then weren't of despair, but of profound, earth-shattering relief. The dam of terror inside me finally broke. In that sterile room, I was finally believed. Section 5. The Aftermath and the Beginning of Justice. Falling Action. The next few hours were a blur of controlled activity. Dr. Thorne knew the texts were a starting point, not a magic key. The evidence had to be handled perfectly. First, she brought in the hospital's patient advocate, a woman whose entire job was to protect patients' rights. After seeing the texts, her expression turned to shock. "This is a clear manipulation of the system for financial gain," she said. Dr. Thorne then had the hospital's IT department create a forensic copy of the phone's data to preserve it for legal proceedings. She wrote a detailed addendum to my file stating I showed no signs of psychosis and officially rescinding the recommendation for an extended hold. The hospital's legal counsel advised that Dr. Thorne, as my doctor, couldn't report the crime for me due to confidentiality rules, but the hospital could and would support me in doing it. They connected me with a lawyer who specialized in conservatorship abuse. My discharge was processed that afternoon. The final lock clicked open, the sound of freedom. Dr. Thorne and the patient advocate walked with me. They didn't just release me to the curb. They made sure I met with my new lawyer, Mr. Chen. "What your sister did is called inheritance theft," he explained, furious on my behalf. "She fraudulently used the mental health system to seize your assets. The involuntary commitment is evidence of her intent." That evening, with Mr. Chen by my side, I walked into a police station. I was no longer a hysterical narrator. I was a credible victim with a lawyer and evidence. I filed a formal police report against Clara for fraud, conspiracy, and unlawful imprisonment. The investigation began immediately. Clara had no idea. She was living in the reality she had created, where she was in control. But the truth was coming for her, and it wasn't going to be quiet. I went to stay with a friend, hiding from the sister who had tried to erase me. I was free from the ward, but the real fight was just beginning. This was the most terrifying and isolating experience of my life. It showed me how easily the systems we trust can be turned against us. But it also showed me the power of one person willing to listen, and the importance of fighting for the truth. So many people in these situations are never believed. If you've ever felt like no one was listening, share your story in the comments. Let's bring these experiences into the light. And if you believe in the power of truth, please like this video and subscribe. Your support helps create a space where these stories can be told. The police investigation moved forward. Faced with warrants and a forensic copy of the texts, Clara's boyfriend crumbled almost immediately, giving a full confession in exchange for a plea deal. He confirmed the entire plot. Clara was arrested 2 days later in the lobby of her lawyer's office, where she had shown up for a meeting about my conservatorship. The poetic justice was not lost on me. Her arrogance was her undoing. She never imagined one psychiatrist would dare to look beyond the paperwork. The legal process was long and grueling. The fraudulent conservatorship petition was thrown out. Recovering the funds she had already siphoned took forensic accountants and court orders, but I got it all back. Clara was convicted of fraud and conspiracy and sentenced to prison. I never spoke to her again. The sister I loved died long before our parents did. I just hadn't been willing to see it. This experience left scars. I'm still haunted by the feeling of powerlessness, of having your own mind used as a weapon against you. But it also taught me about resilience. It showed me that while systems can be flawed, they are made of people. And sometimes it just takes one person, one Dr. Thorne, who is willing to stop, listen, and choose decency over protocol. She didn't just save my inheritance, she gave me back my name and my voice. The world is full of Claras, but it is also full of Dr. Thornes. Finding them and learning to be one for others is the most important thing we can do. I finally took that art residency in New Mexico, and as I paint under the vast open sky, I am rebuilding my world, one brushstroke at a time, in colors of my own choosing.